There's a kind of woman the world walks straight past. Not because she's nothing. Because there's somebody prettier standing next to her, and the eye is lazy, and the eye goes where it's easy. Hannah Mercer had a burn that ran from her jaw down under her collar, and a sister named Della who could stop a man's breath just by laughing at his joke. For 19 years, every cowboy who rode into that valley looked at the two of them and saw only one. Then a drifter named Wade Calloway hung his hat at our place, and on the night of the harvest dance, with the whole county watching, with Della already half turned toward him expecting it, that man walked the long way across the floor and held out his hand to the sister nobody chose. I was standing right there. I've turned that moment over in my head for 30 years, and I still don't think I've gotten to the bottom of it. So let me tell you what I saw, the whole thing, the part that looked like a miracle and the part after that nearly broke it in half. Stay with me, this one stays with you. The fiddle stopped. That's the thing people forget when they tell this story now, and they do tell it badly, with all the corners rounded off. They forget that the music actually stopped, not because anybody told it to. The fiddler, old Prout, just let his bow drift off the strings the way you let a sentence trail away when you've forgotten what you meant to say. The whole barn went the kind of quiet you could hear your own pulse in. I was by the cider table with my bad knee propped on a feed crate, keeping my tally. I keep a tally of most things, always have. Cattle, fence posts, the days since rain, the number of times my late wife told me I think too much and say too little. I had a little ledger book in my vest that night, and I'll be honest with you, I'd been marking down which of the young men were sniffing around Della Mercer, the way you'd mark which bulls were eyeing which gate. I had 4 hash marks. I was about to make it 5. Then Wade Calloway crossed the floor. He didn't cross it toward Della. That was the first wrong note. Della was standing right where the lantern light pooled best. She had a way of finding that spot, the way a cat finds the one warm board on a cold porch, and her chin was already lifting, that small private smile already starting, because of course he was coming for her. Everybody came for her. It was as natural as water running downhill. Wade went past her. I watched it happen and I didn't understand it, and I want you to know I'm a man who understands cattle and weather and the particular grief of a horse with a stone bruise, so it's not that I'm slow. It's that what he did didn't fit anything I had a word for. He walked past the prettiest girl in 3 counties, past her like she was a fence post, and he stopped in front of Hannah. Hannah was where Hannah always was, back by the wall, half in shadow, holding a tin cup she wasn't drinking from. She'd worn a gray dress. I remember being almost angry at the gray dress at the time, like, girl, it's a dance, would it kill you? But I came to understand later that the gray was the point. The gray was armor. You don't put on your good dress to be ignored. It hurts less if you arrive already invisible. You choose the smallness before somebody can hand it to you. She had the scar, of course. Everyone in that valley knew about the scar. It came up out of her collar and laid claim to the left side of her jaw, shiny and pulled, the kind of mark a fire leaves when it decides it's not done with you yet. She'd gotten it the same night her mother died, which was a story the whole county knew and nobody told to her face. People are cowards that way. They'll whisper a thing behind a woman's back for 20 years and never once let her say it out loud and be done with it. Wade stood in front of her. He had his hat in his hands. I noticed that the hat in the hands. A man holds his hat in his hands for 2 reasons, church or respect. There was no church for 100 miles. Miss Mercer, he said, would you dance with me? He didn't say it like a question. That's important. He said it like a fact he'd already decided was true and was just now informing her of. Hannah looked at him the way you'd look at a man who'd asked you to lend him the moon. Not flattered. Suspicious. Hannah was a great many things, but flattered was never one of them. Flattery had never been spent on her, so she hadn't built up any tolerance for it. And what little came her way she treated like a snake that might be the harmless kind or might not. There's some mistake, she said. No, ma'am. My sister's the one you're after. She said it flat, no bitterness in it, just statting the lay of the land the way I'd tell a stranger which creek bends are good for crossing. She's just there. I know where she is, Wade said. And then he just waited, hat in his hands, whole barn watching. And I'll tell you, the bravest thing I saw in all the years that followed, braver than what came later, and there's plenty later, was Hannah Mercer setting down that tin cup and putting her scarred hand into the hand of a man in front of everyone who'd ever decided she wasn't worth looking at. Because doing that meant being seen. And being seen, for Hannah, had only ever meant being seen and found wanting. Prout got his bow back on the strings. The music started up clumsy like a colt finding its legs. They danced. He was a plain dancer, Wade. Competent, no flourishes. But he kept his eyes on her face the entire time. Not on the scar, I watched for that, I'll admit it. I watched to see if his eyes slid off to the scar the way everyone's did, and they didn't. They stayed on her eyes, like the scar was just weather on a landscape he'd already decided to live in. Now, let me back up because I'm telling this wrong, telling the sweet part first like everybody does, and the sweet part isn't the truth of it. The truth is in the why, and the why took me a long time to dig out. Wade Calloway had ridden onto the Mercer spread 11 weeks before that dance, looking for work, on a horse that was worth more than he was. That was the first thing I clocked about him, the horse. A man riding a good horse into a hearing season is a man who's lost everything but one good thing and is holding on to it. You learn to read these signs. I read them. Old man Mercer wasn't in any state to do the hearing by then. The wasting sickness had him. Some days he knew his daughters, and some days he called Hannah by his dead wife's name, which I think hurt the girl worse than the scar ever had, because at least the scar she could see coming in a looking glass. So it fell to me, more or less, to put Wade on. I needed hands. He worked like a man trying to outrun something. I've seen that kind of work before. Usually it's grief. He didn't talk about himself. 11 weeks, and all I had was that he'd come up from Texas. That he'd had something down there once and didn't anymore, and that he flinched at fire. Not a big flinch. A small one, a tightening, the kind you'd miss if you weren't a man who keeps a tally. The first branding we did after he came on, I caught him standing too far back from the irons, jaw set, breathing through his nose like a man riding out a pain in his chest. I didn't say anything. You don't. What I'm telling you is that Wade Calloway was not a whole man when he came to us. He was a man with a hole in him. And that matters because the story everybody tells, the handsome stranger who saw past the scar, the fairy tale of it, that story makes him into a saint, and he wasn't a saint, and turning him into one robs Hannah of the truer thing. The truer thing is this. Wade didn't choose Hannah because he was good and she was overlooked and his goodness reached down to lift her up. He chose her because they were the same kind of broken, and broken people can spot each other across a crowded barn the way two hawks spot each other across an empty sky. Della was whole. Della had never been touched by anything worse than her own good luck, and a man carrying a furnace in his chest doesn't reach for the sunny one. He reaches for the one who'd know what to do with the heat. But I'm getting ahead. Let me come back to the dance, because the dance isn't where it ended. The dance is where the trouble started. Della watched the whole thing. I had a clean line of sight to her face, and I'd give a good deal to forget what I saw on it, because it complicated her for me in a way I didn't want her complicated. It would have been easier if Della had just been a vain girl getting her comeuppance. The county certainly told it that way afterward. The pretty sister, served right, knocked down a peg. People love that story. People love a pretty woman brought low. It makes the rest of them feel better about their own faces. But that's not what I saw. What I saw was a girl who had spent 19 years being chosen, and who had, somewhere underneath all that choosing, started to suspect that it wasn't her they were choosing at all. That it was just the face. That if you peeled the face off there might not be anything they'd cross a room for. And here was the first man who'd peeled the face off and crossed the room the other way, toward her sister, and confirmed the thing she was most afraid of. That's not a comeuppance. That's a wound finding the exact spot it had been afraid of all along. And the worst part, the part that made me set down my pencil, was that Della looked at Hannah dancing, and for just a second, before the hurt closed over it, what crossed her face was something like recognition. Like she just understood too late that her sister had been a whole person this entire time, with a whole interior life of being passed over, and that Della had been one of the ones doing the passing. You can love your sister and still have spent your whole life standing in front of her in the light. Those two things fit in one chest. I know that now. I didn't know it then. I just knew Della went out into the dark before the dance was through, and that nobody followed her because nobody ever thinks the pretty one needs following. The dance ended. Wade walked Hannah back to her place by the wall and put his hat back on, and said something to her too low for me to catch, and she did a thing I had never once in 19 years seen Hannah Mercer do. She laughed. Not a polite laugh. A real one, surprised out of her, the kind that comes up from under the breastbone before you can stop it and dress it up proper. She put her scarred hand over her mouth like the laugh was a thing she had to catch before it got away. And Wade looked at her with that hole in his chest, and for the first time since he'd ridden in on that too-good horse, I saw something in his face that wasn't grief running from itself. I marked it in my ledger that night. I still have the page. It just says, W&H dance something starting. God help them both. I wrote the last part as a joke, mostly. It stopped being a joke before the first snow. Because what nobody at that dance knew, what I didn't know, what Hannah surely didn't, what Wade himself maybe only half admitted, was that Wade Calloway hadn't ridden up from Texas free and clear. A man doesn't ride a too-good horse out of a life that simply ended. He rides it out of a life he ran from. And the thing he ran from was already, that very week, 300 miles east and coming closer, asking in towns for a man on a blood bay gelding with a burned scar of his own under his shirt. But that's the next part, and I need to set this pencil down a minute before I tell it. The cold came early that year, and it came mean. I bring up the weather because everything that happened next happened against it. The way a fight happens against a wall, you can't understand the blows without the thing they're being pressed into. By the second week of real cold, old man Mercer had stopped knowing anybody. He'd lie in the back room and talk to people who weren't there, soft and pleasant, like a man at a party in another year. Hannah sat with him most nights. She'd read to him from the one book in the house, a Bible with the cover gone, and it didn't matter that he couldn't follow it. She said the sound settled him. I think the sound settled her too. Wade started finding reasons to be near that back room. He'd split kindling on the porch just outside the window. He'd fix things that weren't broke. And bit by bit, over those cold weeks, Hannah let him in, not all at once, never all at once. That wasn't her way. She let him in the way you let a half-wild animal into the barn, leaving the door open a crack more each night, never reaching, letting it decide. And I watched a thing grow between those two that I had stopped believing grew at all, having buried my own wife, and decided that part of my life was a closed account. It wasn't pretty, what grew. I want to be clear. People who tell this story make it pretty, and it wasn't. It was two scared, scarred people circling each other in a cold house with a dying man in the next room, each of them braced for the other to leave, each of them so sure they didn't deserve the thing they wanted that they kept trying to give the other one a clean way out. I heard them once. I wasn't trying to. I was bedding down the horses and the wind carried it. You can still go to her, Hannah said. Della, she'd have you. Folks would understand it. Folks would say you came to your senses. I came to my senses the night I quit looking at the pretty one, Wade said. Don't, Sharp. Don't make me into a thing you settled for. I'd rather be passed over plain than dressed up as somebody's good deed. There was a long quiet, the wind. Hannah, he said, I didn't cross that floor to do you a kindness. You think I've got that much spare kindness in me? I crossed it because you were the only person in that whole barn who looked like she knew what it was to be on fire and live through it. I crossed it because I'm a coward about most things, and you were the one thing I wasn't scared of. A pause. I'm scared of plenty. I'm not scared of you. You don't know what that's worth to a man like me." I went on out to the horses. Some things a man shouldn't be standing in the dark to hear. But I carried it with me, that line, the one thing I wasn't scared of, and I have carried it ever since, because I think it's the truest thing I ever overheard about why one person fastens onto another. It's never the prettiness. It's the not being scared. It's finding the one face in the crowd you can set your weight down in front of. So that was the love. That was the thing growing in the cold house. And it would have been enough. It would have made the kind of plain, happy ending that doesn't need a story told about it, except for the man on the road. His name was Cole Ferris. I learned all of this in pieces over years, some of it from Wade and some of it from a deputy, and some of it I put together myself with my tally-keeping habit of mind. But here's the shape of it. Down in Texas, Wade had had a wife. Her name was Mary. He'd had a small place and a wife named Mary and a barn, and a brother-in-law named Cole Ferris, who was the kind of man trouble follows like a dog. Cole had gotten crosswise with some hard people, and had brought that trouble to Wade's door looking for hiding, and Wade, being then a softer and more foolish man, had taken him in. The hard people came in the night. They came with fire. The barn went up and the house went up and Mary went into the house after. I don't know what. Wade never could finish that sentence. After the dog, or after a photograph, or after nothing. After just the blind animal need to save something, and she didn't come out. Wade went in after her and got dragged back by the heat with his hands, and his side burned raw, which is the scar Hannah felt under his shirt and never asked about, because Hannah of all people understood that there are scars you wait to be told about. And Cole Ferris, the man who'd brought the fire to Wade's door, Cole Ferris had run off into the dark while it burned, left his sister in the house, left Wade in the ash. And then, sometime in the months after, with the particular gall that men like that have, Cole got it into his head that Wade owed him, that there'd been money in that house, Mary's money, family money, and that some of it was his by rights, and that Wade had taken it when he ran north. There wasn't any money. There was a too-good horse, which was the last thing of value Wade had, and a hole in his chest where his wife used to be. But you cannot reason with a man who's decided he's owed. I've tried. It's like reasoning with weather. Cole found us the week before Christmas. I was the one who saw him first, riding up the track in the gray light, and I knew before he got close that he was wrong, the way you know a sky's wrong before the storm shows. There's a way a dangerous man sits a horse. Loose. Like nothing matters to him, including himself, which is the most dangerous thing a man can be. What happened next is the part of the story I've never told straight, because it's the part where everybody behaved worse and better than the legend allows. Cole wanted Wade. Wade, to his credit, didn't hide behind the women. He walked right out into the yard. But Cole was smarter than that. Cole had already been to town. Cole had already let it be known in that careful, poisonous way that the new hand at the Mercer place was a man who'd let his own wife burn, that he'd run off with family money, that he wasn't who he said. And here's the morally heavy thing, the decision the whole story turns on, and I want you to sit in it with me the way I've had to sit in it for 30 years. Cole made Hannah an offer. He did it in front of Wade. He said, and I was there, I heard it, he said he'd ride off and never come back, leave Wade be, leave the whole valley be, if the Mercers would just hand over the horse and a stake of cash to see him gone. Said it reasonable, said it like a businessman. And then he looked at Hannah's scar, deliberate, cruel, and he said the thing that he thought would break her, that she ought to thank him for the chance to be rid of Wade, because a girl with a face like that wasn't going to do better than a man with a past like his. The two of them were just two burnt things clinging together out of nobody else wanting either one. He meant it to wound her into agreeing, to make her hand over the horse just to make the moment stop. I watched Hannah's face. I watched the old reflex come up, the gray dress reflex, the get small before they make you small reflex, 19 years deep. I watched her start to fold. And then I watched her not. I have seen brave things. I've seen a man hold a gate against a stampede, and I've seen a woman birth a breech calf in a blizzard with her bare arms inside the cow up to the shoulder. I've never seen anything braver than Hannah Mercer straightening up to her full height in that cold yard, scar and all, in front of the man who just named her worthless, and saying, "He's not a burnt thing clinging to me. He's the only person who ever crossed a room toward me. And I'd take the man who ran into a fire after his wife over the man who ran out of one and left his sister inside. I'd take him 1,000 times, and you can ride off without $1 and tell that in every town you stop in." The yard went dead quiet. She'd done two things at once, you see. She'd refused him the money, and she'd said out loud in front of God and witnesses the thing about Cole that Cole had spent 1.5 years running from, that he'd left his own sister in the fire. She'd taken his poison and handed it back to him with his name on it. I saw Cole's hand move toward his hip. And that's where I have to stop this part, not to torment you, because the next thing that happened fast and crooked and changed all of us, and I've never been able to tell it in the same breath as what came before. Some moments need their own air. I'll just say this to carry you over. When Cole's hand moved, it wasn't Wade who moved first. It was Della. I didn't know how long. None of us had marked her. That was the thing about Della that I only fully understood at the end, the bitter joke of it. We'd spent the whole drama so braced for what would happen to the scarred sister that we'd forgotten the pretty one entirely, left her in a doorway watching, which is the exact place she'd once left Hannah, and which is its own kind of education. When Cole's hand went for his hip, Della came off that doorstep with a shotgun. It was the old Mercer gun, the one that hung over the backroom door, the one I'd have bet money hadn't been loaded since the last president. Turned out Della had loaded it sometime in the night, had seen Cole ride in the day before, had read the same wrong sky I'd read, and had quietly, without telling a soul, made herself ready. The pretty sister. The one nobody followed into the dark. She'd been standing watch over all of us the whole time, and we hadn't even given her the credit of noticing. She didn't fire it. I want to be careful here because the legend gives her a shot and there wasn't one. She just leveled it at Cole Ferris and said, in a voice I'd never heard come out of her, gone hard, gone flat, gone all the way down to the bone of her, "You touch that gun and I'll put you in the ground next to whatever you left in that fire." And Cole Ferris looked at her, and looked at Wade, who'd stepped in front of Hannah, and looked at me because I'd come up on his offside with the axe handle I keep by the barn for reasons exactly like this. 3 of us and his one. And a man like Cole, for all his looseness, for all his not caring, that kind of man cares about exactly one thing, which is his own skin, and the math in that yard had turned against his skin. He took the smart way out, which men like him always do in the end. Their whole danger is that they'll hurt you if it's free, and their whole cowardice is that they won't if it costs. He backed his horse. He said some ugly things, the kind that don't deserve repeating, and didn't land on anybody because we'd all gone past the place where his words could reach. And he rode off down the track the way he'd come, loose in the saddle, like nothing mattered. We never saw him again. I'll tell you what became of him in a moment, because it's part of the ending, and the ending isn't where you'd think. When the sound of his horse was gone, the yard just stood there, cold. Wade was breathing hard. Hannah had her hand pressed flat to her own chest like she was holding her heart in. And Della lowered the shotgun and her arms started shaking, that delayed shake that comes when the danger's past and your body finally lets itself be afraid. Hannah went to her. That's the moment. If this story has a center, that's it, and it isn't the dance, and it isn't Wade, and it isn't even Cole. It's Hannah crossing that yard to her sister, because here's what passed between them that I only understood watching it. These 2 women had spent their whole lives on opposite sides of a wall made of one pretty face and one scarred one. Della on the bright side, getting chosen, never knowing she was lonely. Hannah on the dark side, getting passed over, knowing nothing but. And they'd never once been able to reach each other through it, because the wall was made of the exact thing that nobody would talk about. And it took a man with a gun in the yard to knock a hole in that wall. Hannah reached her sister and Della dropped the shotgun in the dirt and grabbed onto her, and the two of them stood there in the cold holding each other up. And Della said, "I heard this one too. I seem fated to overhear the important things," Della said. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I was always standing in your light and I never even," and she couldn't finish it. And she didn't need to, because Hannah was already saying, I know, it's all right, the way you gentle a horse, the way she'd read to her dying father with that voice that settled things. Two sisters in a cold yard, one pretty, one scarred, finally, after 19 years on the same side of the wall. Now the ending. Old man Mercer died in February, quiet in his sleep, with Hannah's voice going on the Bible's last coverless pages. He never knew about Cole, never knew about the dance, never knew his scarred girl had been crossed a room toward. There's a sorrow in that I've never gotten over, that the people who'd have been gladdest are so often the ones who go before the gladness comes. But he went easy. Some men don't even get that. Wade and Hannah married in the spring. It was a small thing, just the valley, Prude on the fiddle again, and this time when Wade crossed the floor to Hannah nobody's mouth fell open, because by then the whole county had rewritten the story in their heads to pretend they'd seen it coming all along. People do that. They'll pass a woman over for 19 years and then swear they always knew she was the catch. I keep my ledger precisely so I never have to lie to myself that way. Della stood up with her sister. She caught the eye of a quiet rancher's son from the next valley over that same spring, a plain, steady boy, nothing like the men who used to swarm her, and I watched her be careful with him in a way the old Della never would have been, like she'd learned that being chosen for your face is a kind of poverty, and she'd decided to be rich another way. She did all right, Della. Better than all right. But she was never quite the same bright, easy thing she'd been before the gun and the cold yard, and I've come to think that's not a loss. Some brightness is just the gloss on a thing that hasn't been tested yet. And Cole Ferris. The deputy came through that summer with the news. Cole had been killed 2 counties over in a card game by a man even meaner than himself, which is the only ending men like Cole ever really get, the world eventually serving them a bigger version of what they are. But here's the part I've turned over the most. The deputy said that when they went through Cole's things, looking for who to notify, they found one item he'd carried all that way, all that running. A photograph burned at one edge, a young woman. His sister, Mary, the one he left in the fire. He'd carried her the whole time. He'd carried her while he tried to shake money out of the man who'd run into the flames after her. I don't know what to make of that, and I've stopped trying to make anything clean out of it. A man can carry his sister's burned picture in his coat and still be the reason she burned. People aren't sums. They don't add up. That's the thing my tally book could never quite hold, and the thing 30 years of keeping it finally taught me anyway. Wade told Hannah about Mary, eventually. Told her all of it, the barn and the heat, and the sentence he could never finish. She listened the way she listened to everything, with that stillness, and when he was done, she took his burned hand in her scarred one and didn't say a single word about how it wasn't his fault, or how he'd done all he could, or any of the things people say to fill a silence they're scared of. She just held the burned hand in the scarred hand. 2 people who knew what it was to come out the far side of a fire still wearing it on their skin. He'd been right, that night in the cold house. It was never the pretty one. It was the one who knew. I'm an old man now, and my knee's worse, and my wife's been gone a long time, and I keep my ledger out of habit more than need. But I kept one page from all those years separate from the rest. Folded in the back, and I take it out sometimes. It's the page from the night of the dance. W and H something starting. God help them both. I wrote God help them as a joke, like I told you. I've come to think he did, just not in the way any of us were watching for, not by sparing them the fire. By giving each of them somebody who'd already walked out of one. The last time I saw them, Hannah was on the porch of the place that was theirs now, and the light was doing that thing it does at the end of a day, going gold and going soft, and it fell on the scarred side of her face same as the smooth side, No difference. The way light doesn't care. The way light never did care. It was only ever us.